Morning, everyone. I call the meeting to order, and of course, that is the signal to our friends with the media to turn off their cameras and head out. Thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to meeting number 2 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimate, widely known around the world, of course, as the mighty OGGO, the only committee that matters. Before we continue, just a couple of housekeeping items because we have some new members. Just a reminder to keep your headpieces away from your microphones so we can protect the hearing of our very valued interpreters who are joining us today. A couple other things. We do operate OGGO somewhat informally compared to other committees, but we just ask that if you're trying to get to chair's attention, just put up your hand and wait till you're recognized before you start speaking, please. Now we have our very first guest today, pursuant to Standing Order 1083C. We're holding a briefing with our interim parliamentary budget officer, Mr. Jason Jakes, who's been with us many, many times over the years. Congratulations on your appointment, although I think we are disappointed the government ignored the will of the committee with extending our wish to extend Mr. Giroux. I have to say we're very pleased that you've been appointed as the interim PPO. We know you're very dedicated to the role and to the office. So congratulations and welcome back to OGGO, and we'll open the floor with your opening statement, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. My name is Jason Jakes, and I'm honored to serve Parliament as the interim parliamentary budget officer. You got me for another 166 days, unless the Prime Minister appoints somebody else for a 7-year term more quickly. Au moment où j'entame mon mandat.
As I begin my tenure, I want to take a moment to recognize my predecessor, Mr. Yves Giroux. He set high standards of excellence, one that was recognized by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, who ranked Canada as the top independent fiscal institution in the world. I, along with the entire team at the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer, are dedicated to upholding the quality and the integrity of the work that he championed.
This committee today is one of stability and continuity. Our office remains steadfastly committed to its core mandate, providing independent, nonpartisan analysis of the nation's finances, the government's estimates, and the Canadian economy. Parliamentarians and the public can be confident that our work will continue without interruption. We will continue to provide the clear, accessible, and transparent analysis that you expect from our office. Our work will always be guided by evidence and a firm commitment to supporting informed debate within these walls and across the country. To that end, last week we released an analysis of the family wealth distribution. Later this week, we will publish an updated analysis of federal infrastructure spending. And next week, we will publish the economic and fiscal baseline for the country. So in advance of the government's budget 2025, whenever it's published, we think the parliamentarians need to see a 5-year forecast of where the nation's finances currently stand, so they are well prepared to consider whatever the government decides to bring forward as part of its economic and fiscal plan. We recognize that this committee and all of Parliament face key budgetary issues in the months ahead, and that your decisions will impact all Canadians. To that end, I want to extend an invitation. Our door is open. We are here to support your work. We encourage you and your staff to reach out for briefings or with any questions that you may have. We promise to be responsive, clear, and this is bolded in my opening remarks, impartial. Comme les membres du comité le savent,
as members of this committee are aware, I have already reached out to you, to your offices, to offer briefings regarding our plans for the coming months. I thank you for your time, and I will be very pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jakes. I should have told you has been very customary in the past that PBO brings donuts for committee for his appearances. So, thanks very much. We'll start with Mrs. Block for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning and welcome to our committee meeting today. I want to echo the chair's congratulations on your appointment as the interim parliamentary budget officer. Of course, as you know, it was a Conservative government that created this office with a view to receiving that very impartial advice that you noted in your opening remarks. And I look forward to working with you over the next 6 months. And hopefully the Prime Minister will see this appointment as being very important and look to putting someone in place on a full-time, not full-time, but on a permanent basis. I guess I want to get right to some of the questions that we have based on the reports that have been released to date. Would you agree that with a clear definition of what counts as operating spending, it's impossible to evaluate whether the government is on track to meet its fiscal anchors?
I would say officially we're within the office. I don't know that the government currently has fiscal anchors, which of course causes the people that I work with a considerable degree of concern at this point. As everyone knows, the government did have fiscal anchors. The previous Minister of Finance had the fiscal anchor of a ceiling of the annual deficit at 1% of GDP, along with a declining debt to GDP ratio. It's unclear where those stand. They haven't been reiterated by the current government, to the best of my knowledge. With respect to your point regarding the capital and the operating side, we haven't seen a clear definition of what would fall into capital and what would fall into operating. So at this point, it's impossible for us and for you as parliamentarians to assess the likelihood or probability of the government hitting any fiscal target.
Thank you very much. So do you have any idea of when the government will give a concrete definition of its spending criteria, what its fiscal anchors may be, so that you can do the very important work of monitoring the government's spending plans?
The short answer is no. There's a longer answer I can give to you if you have more time, but the longer answer is we're waiting for budget 2025 at this point. So traditionally what happens is all is revealed in a 400 to 500 page document. And at that point, we will have a clear sense of precisely what the fiscal anchors are. And if the fiscal anchor continues to be balancing an operating budget, hopefully at that point, there will be a definition of what that operating budget actually means.
Thank you. So if the government is impeding the PBO from fulfilling its mandate as a fiscal monitor without any fiscal anchors being identified, a budget that has not been presented yet, and it sounds like it's going to be pushed back even further than what the Prime Minister promised earlier, would you say it creates more uncertainty for potential business investment in Canada?
So the uncertainty is always elevated in a period of low transparency. That goes without saying, well researched and well demonstrated. And that's why the Parliamentary Budget Office was created and set up in 2008. So in these situations where, for whatever reason, there ends up being a gap in fiscal transparency, the Parliamentary Budget Office will not only point out that potentially we're operating with incredibly low levels of fiscal transparency, which will feed into business uncertainty, among other things. But the Parliamentary Budget Office can actually step in and try to alleviate part of that, which is why next week we're going to be publishing our economic and fiscal baseline. So a new 5-year forecast, our outlook on the economy, as well as our outlook on the deficit figures for the next 5 years. And hopefully that will alleviate some of the uncertainty.
How much time do I have, Chair? I have a minute and 15 seconds. So I guess my next question would be, if the government were to balance its operating budget, but continue to increase its inflationary spending, who ends up paying for that spending?
Well, there's only, I would say two things. So the short answer to your question is there's only one taxpayer. So the people of Canada work hard. They send money to Ottawa that all of you get to vote on and decide how it's going to be spent across the country. So if there's additional money borrowed, obviously it has to be paid back at some point, and the people of Canada are going to do that. I would also circle back on my previous answer with respect to the operating and capital budget. We currently don't have a definition of the operating budget, so it's purely speculation on anybody's part at this point. What would happen should the operating budget that has not been defined by the government be balanced?
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Mr. Gear, go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Sir, I'd like to echo calls from the opposition and the Chair as well in congratulating you for your interim appointment. Regarding the line of questioning that was just asked, what was the old definition of operating expenses that was used beforehand?
Well, I think the standard definition that we would go to, so we published a note on this over the course of the summer. So there ends up being a standard definition that I think a lot of people will be familiar with in the budget. So in the budget, when you're looking at the expense line, the expense table, you come down and there's a line called operating expenses. And typically those operating expenses, as currently defined by the Government of Canada, primarily include things like salaries. So salaries, things related to salaries like professional services expenses, utilities, anything related to the ongoing operations of the government. And again, anything I would say at this point is a speculation, right? Because there hasn't been an official backgrounder issued by the Government of Canada, by the Department of Finance regarding what the new definition could potentially be. But yeah, that's the traditional definition that all of us are familiar with.
The Minister has announced that we're going to increase capital expenses as opposed to operating expenses. So how might the separation of operating and capital expenses affect the transparency of federal spending?
I think going back to a point that I made earlier, I think the first aspect is how the terms are actually defined. So in terms of we currently have definitions of operating and capital that show up in the budget. People are familiar with it. They show up in the public accounts audited by my counterpart, the Auditor General of Canada. And if these terms are defined differently to mean different things, there obviously ends up being a risk that people end up being confused or the terms end up being conflated even though they mean slightly different things. So that's obviously a risk, and that's something that we're going to be paying attention to. And obviously it's something that the Department of Finance and the government is aware of, right? So not that, I don't know, I was appointed by the Prime Minister, and I don't need to make his arguments for him, but potentially someone taking more time to come up with a comprehensive and well thought out definition of what operating and capital look like before rolling out a new definition and a new way of presenting things, potentially it isn't a bad thing.
Yeah. So in your viewpoint, were those definitions dated, and should they be updated?
Those definitions primarily come from international accounting standards. So in terms of the existing definitions, and a point that we made in the report that we published in the summer is from our starting point, everyone around the world is familiar with them. The Government of Canada doesn't control those definitions, so they're impartial and independent. If you run a business or you're a small business person, you're familiar with those definitions as well. And that's, for us, that means that those are the definitions we're going to be focusing on. Certainly, I've been here for 17 years, and from my perspective, parliamentarians get this sense of a bottom line. So are you borrowing more money, borrowing less money? Do you have a deficit? Do you have a surplus? We haven't had a surplus in a while, so we haven't had to talk about that. But changing the definitions at this point to say, well, do you have a surplus in your operating budget versus your capital budget? It'll be definitely a challenge in nomenclature and trying to explain things. And also, something obviously members of the committee are aware of, there aren't a lot of people on the Hill who have a detailed financial background. So they're really smart people. Obviously, parliamentarians are smart, committed, they're willing to put in the time and the effort, otherwise they wouldn't be here. And at the same time, they don't have time to go into excruciating detail around the international financial standards definition of what an operating budget is, and then do the cross comparison to something else, which I guess is why we're here. So ultimately, whenever the government ends up with a definition, whatever definition they end up with, the Parliamentary Budget Office will be here to explain it to the best way we know how to support parliamentarians.
So it's been a long time since I took accounting in undergraduate, maybe not that long. But I remember there was several different standards, actually. There was an international standard, there was an American standard as well, and there was a bit of a tussle between the two of which one should reign supreme. So, is it still the case that there are several definitions floating around? I understand the benefit of the continuity of keeping a certain definition, but, in today's day and age, to model today's spending expenditures, I think you had also mentioned that maybe it's not the worst thing to update those definitions.
No, not at all. So I think to answer, because probably I'm getting evil eyes from the chair, so I'll cut to what I think is like the most. We can have a geeky discussion about accounting standards. To answer your question on, is it a bad thing to update standards in the presentation of documents? Absolutely not. And if the approach internally within the government is to move to a decision-making approach where they're internally within the public service, they're going to be focusing on operating versus capital, I would hope that they would be presenting that in the budget so people could actually understand how the government is making decisions and what it looks like. So that it would be non-transparent, or to undermine transparency, to have one way of making decisions inside the government and then to present a set of financial statements or a set of financial information without incorporating what the government knows internally. So yeah, and there's always room for improvement, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. We'll go to Ms. Gaudreau, please. 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
It's a privilege to have you here as our witness here today, Mr. Jacques. I'm very much aware of what we are going through in the political arena right now, and I'm very impatient to see your report next week as to the economic situation. We do want to do our work. That said, I do seek some clarification. I will say, presently, the Prime Minister is speaking about an austerity budget, but of a budget of investment as well at the same time. As an entrepreneur, if people say that, and people ask me how can you balance these two, certainly they are necessary for balancing fiscal stability, but what can be done? Well, thank you. Perhaps the Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance would be better placed than I am to answer your question. It would be difficult, though, in simple terms. As we discussed earlier in this meeting, this is a very difficult time. There are 100,000 jobs that were involved this summer, and also there is an increase in the consumer price index that has occurred. So in the present economic context, it is very difficult. And if you compare this to before the elections, and now, it's much more difficult now. That is to say, the situation. If you compare that to earlier forecasts, you, as members of Parliament and senators, your duty is to establish a path that will lead to change in the economy of Canada. to be sure that there will be sustainable growth on the long term. The basic hypothesis of our economy with the United States, well, that's in the past, in the rear view mirror now. It's done. And as the Prime Minister said, there has been a rupture with the U.S. It will be incredibly difficult to go back in time. It's in the economic context, I would say that it's even more difficult than it was the case in the pandemic or in 2008 or in 2001. Yes, but I know with your 17 years of experience, you will be able to shed light on the situation, and I'm not concerned about that, about your wisdom. Now, this speech, that seems to be ongoing in the G7 about the GDP. Best in the GDP is what was said. But is this perhaps smoke and mirrors? Is this something that the Canadians can take as a given or not? Well, I think for us and for most people in governments around the world, the GDP is a very simple figure, but an important one because it's easy to identify a situation with it. Is Canada stable or not? And also, there are two aspects to that figure. You have the debt and all the payments, that is, that we have to pay to service the debt. And there is the other issue, which is the size of the Canadian economy. For us, that is the important aspect because that is the very basis of economic growth. That is the issue of economic growth that rests on that. So what would happen with the U.S. economy because of the ties that exist between Canada and the United States? But as you know, everything is in a state of reevaluation right now with what happened last year. We exported certain goods and services to the United States, but that will not be the case in the future. We need to be able to restructure our economy to increase the growth rate of our economy. And the debt to GDP ratio may well drop a bit, but there can be an increase on the other side. I would have another question next time.
Just so you know, when we get back to the block, it will be, instead of a 2.5 minute, it will be a 5 minute because I'm combining the next two rounds for her. So we'll skip her the next round. Mr. Patzer, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Jakes, for being here. Just wondering, has the government been consulting your office yet when it comes to the development of a budget for this fall?
Yes, the government did reach out to us. The Department of Finance reached out to us last week. We had a very productive discussion, although short discussion with them, with respect to some of their ideas around the operating and capital budget definitions.
There's a rumor that's hit the news here yesterday, today, about them delaying the budget possibly until November. Does that complicate things for you, or does that throw any wrenches into the gears for how you're able to do your job and be able to effectively provide that transparency for taxpayers?
The short answer is no, it doesn't. And in fact, I go back to that's why our office was created. If the government wants to take 10 months before they put up an Excel spreadsheet that indicates what their deficit estimates are for the next 5 years, that's great for us. And we will go in and we'll fill the space. And next week, you're going to see a 5-year forecast from us. And if the government wants to go 12 months without producing a budget, I would, as a citizen, I'd feel a little bit uncomfortable. As somebody who works in the Parliamentary Budget Office, I would say, that's great for us because we will occupy all the space that they decide to give up.
Interesting. Did you get a chance to look at the Liberal government's campaign after they were elected and formed government? Did you get a chance to look at the spending announcements, the promises, and give a costing analysis of that? Post-election, not pre-election, post-election?
No, we haven't gone through the platform. So as you may be aware, one aspect of our mandate is to cost electoral promises on the request of a particular political party. We did some of that work, as you can see on our website, for the Liberal Party of Canada. We typically do not circle back after the election to cost the entire platform, because usually there's a bit of space between what's in the platform and what ultimately ends up being implemented. And especially given the current period of uncertainty, we wanted to make sure that we were focused on what Parliament is actually voting on. Because once the election is over, our mandate is to squarely focus on the decisions that parliamentarians are making. So it's great to have something in the platform, and if y'all, vous, are not voting on it, it's from our perspective, it's a waste of everybody's time.
There was I guess, a request by the Prime Minister to Cabinet to find $25 billion in savings by this fall. How hard would it be for the government to find $25 billion in savings by the fall?
Yeah, I don't know. I work for the Parliamentary Budget Office, not the Parliamentary Spending Restraint Office. But the one thing I will say, so for the first 10 years of my career, I worked in the federal public service, in finance, the Privy Council office, the Treasury Board Secretariat, and the Bank of Canada. I spent a lot of time working on restraint exercises. The timelines are tight, so you can certainly find money. The timelines are very, very tight that the government has in mind, and given the order of magnitude of funding that they're looking at, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that, to the best of my knowledge, it is a significant undertaking. And potentially, I think the public service is certainly up to the challenge, but if you go back to the 2012 restraint exercise, I think in that situation, we had the 2011 election, Parliament came back in June, direction was provided to the public service at the end of June, and then we had a budget in March of the subsequent year in 2012. So in that situation, you were looking at around a 5% spending cut, as opposed to, I understand now it's 7.5%, going up to 15%. And in that situation, for the 5% spending cut, you were looking at 9 to 10 months. So you can do it, but it'll be tight for them.
Does it make it tough when the Prime Minister comes out and announces $13 billion in a new bureaucracy for a housing fund? There's $4 billion for Ukraine, $9 billion in defense spending. He just announced $9.5 billion more in Toronto here the other week. I mean, on one hand, he's saying find $25 billion in savings, but on the other hand, he's announced more than that in new spending. Like, I guess in November when you get the budget, maybe you'll get a chance to see how that's gonna pan out. But is that mixed signal make it hard for your office to find clarity in how you're gonna account for that?
There's time for a yes or no question answer, so perhaps save it for the next round.
No, and you'll see we're tracking all these announcements, and we have, I would say, the Department of Finance is very helpful in providing detailed information with respect to the spending over a 5-year period of time that each of these announcements are going to cost, and we account for all of it and we keep track of it, and you'll see next week with our updated economic and fiscal outlook.
Thank you. Ms. Suds, please go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Jacques, for being with us today and for stepping up in this new capacity. Wishing you well in your 166 days. Short amount of time to get a lot done, I know. We've spoken a bit this morning about the uncertainty that is certainly felt, I think, in the economy right now. And I would say particularly in light of the trade war, both U.S. and China, and the implications of that in our economy. We've heard repeatedly from our Prime Minister the efforts to build Canada strong, to build the strongest economy in the G7, with really a focus on making the necessary investments in Canadians, in our economy, to be able to achieve that and support throughout these times. You mentioned in one of your comments around, the key being the size of the economy, really to our prosperity. And I'm wondering, as we move towards budget shortly, what you or how you believe the budget can contribute to, first of all, mitigating that uncertainty, but secondly, contribute to growing the economy.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I always, in terms of, I will channel, I think most people in the room would not be familiar with the seminal piece of work that the Prime Minister put together when he was the Associate Deputy Minister of Finance in 2005, called A Plan for Growth and Prosperity, that was published by the Department of Finance. So going back to the Prime Minister's own microeconomic framework, there are two key things in an economy, right? You got people, and we have, in Canadians, we got like 41 million people that are hardworking and diligent and really talented. And then you got how they're organized and what they got to work with. So you have labor, and then you got the productivity and how you support those people. And anything you can do at this point, and I think certainly based upon the government statements, they're focused more on the productivity side. So how you support, what tools you provide to people, how you organize them with different types of businesses, what type of additional infrastructure needs to be put in place so people can be more productive, earn bigger paychecks, pay more taxes so we can reduce that deficit. I think those are probably some of the most important things that I certainly expect to see coming out of Budget 2025. And then as well, something you alluded to, on the people side, certainly investments or supports for people for retraining. I'm around for 166 days. Following that, I hope to go back to my old job unless Parliament deigns to keep me around for longer. But if I'm looking for a new job, I'm definitely going to be counting on employment insurance, some of the retraining programs. I'm 50 years old. I think I still got a couple of years left to make a contribution to the economy. And that's something else that we're going to be looking at for Budget 2025. Because again, like 100,000 involuntary job losses over the summer, right? Like the labor market is a lagging indicator. So all those people are going to be looking for new jobs. They're not necessarily going to find jobs in the fields that they were in previously and what they were trained for. And I think all of us know that's something where the government can step in and provide them with some sort of support so they can make the best contribution possible to the Canadian economy and society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know just last week, Minister Patty Hajdu made an announcement around retraining and being able to be there for Canadians as the economy shifts and as the job market shifts. So certainly I think a really key component of that as our government makes these investments, whether that be through the Major Projects Office and major infrastructure projects, but of course also here in Ottawa with the public service. So certainly would agree the talent piece is a big piece, and the retraining as we've seen those commitments. I'll leave it with that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Goodrow, please, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are really in terms right now of, we are at a turning point, rather. It's very difficult. My fellow citizens tell me that with respect to C5, what's going to happen? When are we going to have a budget? Is the budgetary process going to become an exercise of a type of clearinghouse, I might say, just to validate what has happened. People are very concerned, but we don't want to hear any type of detrimental effect on democracy. Well, I have to say, even with 17 years' experience, that I have the same fears. We are at a turning point, a moment of great change, and it is important to act transparently on the economy, to have a debate with members from all sides who have different lived experience, to be able to hammer out a mandate for change. And also, we have to consider the capacity of the government to make cuts, restructure in terms of the economy, maybe in terms of transfers to organizations or to some people. But the most important aspect that the populace should feel is that the whole process has to be transparent. Here in the House of Commons, it is one thing, but there are other areas. We make recommendations to people about certain types of changes. What would you like to see as change in the budget? But you are here for a reason in terms of a democracy. We will continue to ensure that we have the necessary time, not only just to analyze the reports, but also to discuss them and debate them. I don't have much time left, but last week we found that there was, in terms of France, political instability, but also economic instability. We here in Canada are trying to build a strong Canada. So what's going to happen to our international rating? Well, all countries, I think that all countries are probably grappling with the same problem. In the context of Canada, with respect to the debt to GDP ratio, we're probably better off than some other countries, some European countries specifically. But the challenge is the same for everyone in the world. I think that in the context of Canada, we have a bit more flexibility in terms of the fiscal framework, but maybe not. That may not be the case in other countries. We look at the macro level at what the strategy should be. Should there be, hopefully, long-term growth? And there is always change. There is the probability, or indeed the reality, of loss. The economy really is the people. And with people, there is change. There's change in terms of businesses, their obligations, their need to renew and upskill, renew their skills. All of that may well lead to a new structure for Canada's economy. As an economist myself, we know that there is a sustainable growth which must be built on an economy where people feel that the system is fair and equal. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have a point of order?
May I ask a question?
Of
Our guest?
no.
No?
When your
Okay.
turn is up, or when your turn comes around, you may.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Jansen, the floor is yours, please, for 5.
Mr. Jakes. I really appreciate the fact that you recognize we are not all accountants here and that you're going to help us understand things. So, in that vein, for regular Canadians, can you explain just in simple words, what the Liberals mean when they say they're going to separate an operating budget from a capital budget? Like, what changes on the books when they do that?
So to answer your last question first, the bottom line of the government will not change. So the international public sector standards that everyone uses to measure the deficit and levels of debt, that will not change. And the first reason that won't change is those are the accounting standards. The second reason is the ratings agencies won't let you change it. Like, that's the first thing they're going to go to, and if they have a sniff that somehow there's a change in presentation, you bet your boots that we're going to be paying more for debt pretty quickly. In terms of operating capital, again, we, on our end, we don't know what the government precisely has in mind, so there's been no backgrounder published on the website. In some of the communication materials, the government has mentioned the UK, the United Kingdom, who's had a similar system in place. In that situation, on the operating side, the UK includes the operating expenses that I mentioned earlier, so the traditional measure, in addition to other types of transfer payments. On the capital side, they include the traditional measure as well as transfer payments or money that's being paid out to third parties who also invest in capital. So in the case, we have a report that's going to be coming out on Thursday that looks at infrastructure spending. So the federal government transfers, I don't know, over the next 5 years, I think it's going to be over $100 billion to provinces, municipalities, and First Nations to spend on infrastructure. That doesn't show up as capital spending for the federal government, but it's actually resulting in building capital assets. So that's something that they could have in mind. I don't know. I'm not inside the tent, so.
Okay, so I guess like your bottom line is debt, right? If family takes out a loan for a new roof, it's still debt, even if they call it an investment. And same for Ottawa, borrowing, it's still debt.
Yeah, it's absolutely still debt. I think the nuance, and potentially I'm hopeful, potentially I'm not naive. The nuance is, if this is the new management approach for the Government of Canada, and every time they are making a new spending decision, they are saying, okay, is this going to result in some sort of productive asset that's going to provide a stream of long-term benefits? Then that is certainly different than the way that the Government of Canada has managed its money up to this point internally. And if that's going to be the way that they're going to manage things, then I would hope that they would convey that and explain that to parliamentarians just by way of transparency, because you deserve to know how they make decisions.
Right, so thinking about this a little bit further, like if credit rating agencies or lenders kind of see the government starting to change things, like for instance, even just the budget date, making a lot of changes that way, and our debt climbing, but if Ottawa is just saying, oh no, everything's fine, could that hurt our credit rating or raise the cost of borrowing for Canadians?
I think certainly with respect to credit rating agencies, they have quantitative metrics that they look at, and they have qualitative metrics that get down to a question of credibility. And certainly, if there isn't a fixed budget date, the budget date is being delayed, the government is not publishing a medium-term forecast, then obviously it kind of eats into the confidence that one's going to have regarding, and especially in light of all the additional spending announcements, it could eat into the confidence that people have. But at the same time, happily, Canada is also blessed with the best independent fiscal institution in the world, according to the OECD, which means that if there is a lack of transparency in one area, we're in a good position to offset that. And I can say we meet with the ratings agencies on a regular basis, and they are very keen to receive our analysis.
So I understand then that your office is going to commit to publishing clear side-by-side numbers, right? Using the old method and the new one, so Canadians will really be able to see borrowing no matter what the government calls it?
Yeah, Absolutely. What we've committed to doing, and what we committed to doing in the report we published in the summer, is we've committed to using the traditional measure. So the measure that everybody else in the world uses, and the government of Canada has used up to this point, that's what we're committing to. We will see what the government incorporates in Budget 2025 in terms of the operating and the capital budget. And if the definitions they develop, from our perspective, are not helpful to parliamentarians, are potentially misleading, then we will not analyze that because it's not helpful. There are only 36 of us in the office. Our time is limited. Your time is limited. We shouldn't be spending time analyzing things that simply don't make sense.
And our time is limited.
Sorry.
We'll go to Ms. Rochefort, please, for 5 minutes.
Oui, thank you, Chair. I simply wanted to advise that I had a question to ask, so I'm glad it's my turn. Thank you so very much. And I appreciate being here this morning, our first meeting of the fall. J'ai beaucoup aimé, Monsieur Jacques, vos commentaires.
Mr. Jakes, I really appreciated your commentaries when you said it wasn't normal times. You talked about rupture, and I like that. Because we are really living through a period of rupture with the United States, but there's great change in all countries, economically speaking. I appreciated your comments that we are facing an economic restructuring in Canada that will bring about great change. Now, with respect to your 166 days or 176 days, what are your priorities? Do you see possible change in terms of how you operate with respect to how your predecessor operated? How do you see life in the next 166 plus days in your mandate? Thank you for your question. First of all, our organization is targeting Budget 2025. That is what we are concentrating on. And we are dealing with the House of Commons resources. And your time, I think, would also be directed towards Budget 2025. As to any type of operational difference with Mr. Giroux, when I received the call, I indicated that there will be no change. Whether or not Mr. Giroux is right here now, Mr. Giroux built an incredibly effective and efficient agency, and I am following on in his footsteps. The Prime Minister said that he wants exactly the same thing from me. We stay on the same path. We, in his words, must have a strong organization for the next 166 days, and I respect the Prime Minister's wishes, and I will ensure that they are followed out.
Minutes. Mrs. Block, please, for 5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. At the end of my last round of questioning, Mr. Jakes, you confirmed that Canadians are still left to pay for Liberals' inflationary spending. Should that concern or alarm Canadians?
I think in the same way that you'd be worried about any in managing your own household finances, people are really aware of how much money they owe and how much they're paying on debt service costs. Yeah, you definitely should be aware of it. And in a situation where you're in a context where the labor market sucks, wages are not going up, you're facing significant technological change right now, and some of the major priors or assumptions of how the world works and how the economy works are changing or they're gone. Yeah, it would definitely cause me. I think it would cause anybody anxiety to worry about how much debt you had, how much you were paying on it.
Thank you. Given the Liberals' election plans included $20 billion in tariff revenue, and now there are no counter tariffs, can Canadians expect the deficit to grow even more?
You're trying to get a sneak peek at our new figures for next week. You know what I'd say is without divulging anything. Although I'm at committee and you're the clients, so the short answer is yes. So I won't get into the precise numbers, but in comparison to our last medium-term forecast, the deficit will absolutely be higher, and the countervailing tariffs are certainly one part of that. The other part of it is additional spending.
So a recent news story from La Presse outlines a scenario in which the deficit exceeds $100 billion. Could this really be possible?
I guess we'll see. I think the last time I saw the article, well, actually, someone mentioned the article to me, and my immediate reaction was, the last time we were close to a $100 billion deficit was 2021, 2022 during the pandemic, during lockdowns, vaccine mandates, capacity restrictions. I don't know. I haven't had to wear a mask in a long time, but potentially we are getting in $100 billion. Potentially not. I won't say our numbers are close to that or not. You'll have to wait until next Thursday.
Costs are up by 3.5%. In today's StatsCan inflation release, core inflation is above target. Will a deficit that's pushing $100 million make this situation worse? And I'll just remind everyone that the Prime Minister has said Canadians will judge him by the cost of food at the grocery store. So will the cost of food and the core inflation being above target potentially make the situation worse if we're pushing $100 billion in deficit?
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends on how the money's being spent. That's always the bottom line. So depending on currently by our estimates and the estimates of other economists, there's a fair amount of slack in the economy. So engaging in some sort of economic stimulus traditionally wouldn't be a bad thing. So when you have the slack in the economy, to ensure that people can more easily find jobs and businesses have customers. As well, one could anticipate a situation where the money's being spent in such a way, if it is being spent in investment in infrastructure, in facilitating the flow of goods from other parts of the world back into Canada, and vice versa, supporting our exports. Potentially, that's something as well that could reduce inflation and reduce food prices. It's tough to say. I don't know. There's around a speculative figure without a budget where we know how the money's going to be spent. I think I'm very much off in Wonderland right now.
Thank you very much.
Great. First of all, thank you for your service. And not just now over the next 166 days, but your previous public service. It's great to see incredibly talented people like yourself stepping up, so thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's brought me back to previous careers that I had before I decided to join this place. And I was head of sustainable finance at a global financial institution. And I was also at one point principal secretary to former Toronto Mayor John Tory. And as you know, the City of Toronto has an operating budget and a capital budget. And I can tell you as someone who's financed infrastructure, there's also a fundamental difference between spending money on operating expenses and investing in productive assets. So the separation between operating and capital is critical. And frankly, the federal government should have been doing this sooner. So I just want to drill down a little bit here. Is it safe to assume when you are investing in infrastructure that the long-term productivity benefits to the economy, the revenue that it generates more broadly, isn't necessarily inflationary, but it adds a product, that increase in productivity actually helps alleviate some of those problems?
Yes.
Thank you.
I can give you a longer answer.
No,
but
that's,
you seem to
I
have
just
more
wanted a
questions.
nice, simple, clear answer because it seems to be some confusion from the other side about what the difference is between the two. So, and do you also agree that when you are financing productive assets, that in the long run helps alleviate our deficit?
To the extent that they are productive assets that enhance productivity and growth, the growth rate in the economy, absolutely.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Mr. Patzer, please.
Earlier, Mr. Jakes, there was I would consider it an offhand comment about how many days you have left in office. But I think it goes to the bigger question, though, about the process, about how it was that you came to be the interim parliamentary budget officer. Were you contacted by the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office? Like, what did that process look like for you to be appointed as the interim PBO?
Thanks for the question. I'll speak to my own experience. It was very fast. It was very fast and occurred over the Labor Day weekend. And I was contacted by the Prime Minister's office, and they asked if I was willing to serve on an interim basis. My immediate response was, I know someone who's really qualified, who is going to be unemployed on Wednesday, who would definitely be an incredibly talented interim parliamentary budget officer, and that person is Mr. Yves Giroux. There was silence on the other end of the phone line from the Prime Minister's office, at which point I indicated to the Prime Minister's office that if I was to take the job to fill in for a set period of time, then I would continue to do everything that Mr. Giroux had been doing up to that point. So there'd be no change in terms of the focus on excellence in the office and transparency and the frequency of reporting. And the Prime Minister's office said that they expected no less. But yeah, it definitely, if you receive a phone call on a Saturday night over a long weekend from someone purporting to be from the Prime Minister's office, it might actually be real. I tell my kids not to take those phone calls, but...
Is there any opportunity, do you think, a pathway for you to become the permanent PBO after your 166 days are up?
So, as part of the interim appointment, the understanding I have, and what's been explained to me by both the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office, is that at the end of the interim appointment, I return to my old job in the Parliamentary Budget Office as the Director General of Economic and Fiscal Analysis. The Prime Minister's office asked me if I was willing to continue for a full 7-year mandate, and I explained to them that it wasn't up to them. So they can propose whomever they want, and it's up to parliamentarians to make the determination regarding who will serve them as their parliamentary budget officer for a 7-year term. So I think the best path, we'll see who the Prime Minister ultimately decides to nominate and put forward to you for a 7-year term. If the Prime Minister, through his office, asks me to serve, I would certainly be willing to be a candidate. But ultimately, it's up to parliamentarians to make that determination. the position, a parliamentary budget officer, is created under the Parliament of Canada Act. So it's not a government position, it's a parliamentary position. The office was created to support parliamentarians in their understanding, to enhance their understanding of the budget, to support parliamentarians in challenging what the government is bringing forward. So it's not up to me. I would argue it's not even up to the government, or like whether on the public service side or the Prime Minister. It's up to parliamentarians to determine whether the candidate that the Prime Minister wants to bring forward is the candidate they think is best placed to actually support them in their deliberations.
There we go. Do you think the process by which interim PBOs are selected should mirror that of how the permanent PBO is selected? Do you think that process maybe is flawed or should be fixed, or like just kind of have what you've gone through? I mean, like, to your point, you work for parliamentarians, not for the government, right? So do you think that without consultation of parliamentarians, that the appointing an interim PBO, I appreciate the work that you're doing, right? I mean, I'm not saying this is a slight towards yourself, but I'm just talking about the process here at which this goes. Do you think there should be changes to how that process is?
Yes. Like, the simple answer is it is ludicrous that you have somebody foisted on you who is selected by the head of the executive branch, and it could have been anybody. So under the legislation, it's a person that the Prime Minister can appoint. So the Prime Minister could have selected anybody. I don't even think it needs to be a Canadian citizen. The Prime Minister could have appointed anybody from around the world with a pulse, without any consultation with parliamentarians. I happen to think it's a big endorsement that he chose somebody from the office that's worked in the office starting in 2018 when it was established under Prime Minister Harper, working with Kevin Page, going through Jean-Denis Fréchette, working with Yves Giroux, and having the expanded mandate under former Prime Minister Trudeau. I think it's a great testament to the confidence that the Prime Minister has in the work that the office is doing. There's a big legislative gap because you could have had anybody in front of you today who doesn't understand the work of the office, who has never dealt with parliamentarians before, qui ne sont pas capables de communiquer en français,
who can't speak French. It's not a requirement to be bilingual. It's not a requirement to have any type of experience in budget management.
I was told by the chair I shouldn't ask questions of members of the committee, but I'll ask you the question. I assume that you have input in hiring your own staff, right? So in this situation, you didn't. You had somebody else who knows your best interests who said, hi, this is the person who's going to be helping you pull apart Budget 2025 and make sense of it. So, yeah, it needs, from my perspective, it needs to be fixed. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gahir, did anyone wish to follow up, or otherwise we'll go to Ms. Jansen, Ms. Gaudreau, and then we'll be done except for some housekeeping.
No, our side doesn't have more questions.
Perfect.
Thank
We'll
you.
go to Mrs. Block Mrs. Jansen for 5, Ms. Gaudreau for 5. Sorry, and then we'll finish with Mrs. Block. Please go ahead.
If you don't mind, I'd like to change the channel, and I would love to talk about the housing report that you guys put out from your office. So when it comes to housing, the Prime Minister promised warp speed, but it feels like we ended up circling the parking lot. In the election, he promised 500,000 homes a year, telling Canadians he would be doubling construction. Now, your report says that real number is closer to 227,000. Can you tell me, is that correct?
That's correct. Our number is substantially lower. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like 690,000 home shortfall by 2035 at this rate. Is that correct? According to your math, we're way off, right?
Well, actually, this is one of the reports where it was actually good news for the government. So even though we disagreed with the government's findings of needing to build 500,000 homes per year, our conclusion was that actually they needed to build fewer homes to return to the target. So there's actually less of a challenge than originally anticipated. And one of the key things that we identified was if you actually built all those homes based upon the historical structure of the housing market, you would have a vacancy rate north of 10%. So 1 in every 10 homes would be empty, which would be unprecedented and would also could arguably result in a situation where there's significant downward pressure on housing prices.
Is that coming out of, some of the CMHC's reporting about that they're already cutting forecasts? Is that part of your analysis?
So yeah, we do incorporate. We work closely. I should say, from a technical perspective, we definitely share information with respect to our modeling and CMHC's modeling. We have a bit of a difference of opinion. So I noticed that nobody from the political side of the government came out when we published our housing report and said these numbers are awful. Senior officials from CMHC came out and said that they didn't like our numbers and they disagreed with it for persnickety technical reasons. But yeah, we're very aware of what CMHC is doing, what their numbers look like, and we're in constant, regular contact with them. Certainly on our end, when we publish something, like our objective is to enhance transparency, and we're not enhancing transparency if we're not accounting for the numbers that the government's publishing and the announcements that they're making. So if we're publishing something and it's already stale dated and it doesn't actually incorporate new directions that the government's going in, from our perspective, it doesn't serve parliamentarians particularly well.
So that's fascinating information. So I mean, we know that starts are down, right? Like Toronto is dropping from 37,000 starts to as low as 23,000, I think, in 2027. Vancouver's down 26% next year. Are you saying then that this build big, bold, it is maybe more than we're going to need?
If they're able to achieve it, so the key finding of the paper was if they're actually able to achieve the 500,000 housing starts per year, you would end up in a very odd place in the housing market with incredibly high vacancy rates. So in terms of the policy objective that they're trying to achieve based upon our modeling, they don't need to hit such a high target necessarily. It's not to say that everything's going to be affordable and people are going to be able to afford the homes that they want, or we're going to return affordability to where it was in the 1970s. But in terms of the immediate policy objective identified by the government, potentially you don't need to be at the 500,000 level.
So they could use some of that $4 billion that they were going to use for their new bureaucracy towards some savings.
or investments in something else.
Okay, yeah. There you go.
Right? This is why we're waiting for a budget, right?
Excellent.
A budget
yes.
gives you those trade-offs.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate your frankness because it's extremely helpful for us. I mean, we are seeing housing starts coming down. I'm hearing it from my own constituents, and we were told we don't want house prices to come down, but if we continue on the path as you're suggesting, we may well see that happening. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gaudreau, please go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I really just have two questions. The first is this. I'd like to go back to what we're going to have as a budget. That is to say, this new way of showing how a budget is built. And that, this is of great concern to us in Quebec. The government has two fundamental things to do. It has its fundamental mission, but it also has to support its economy through business and jobs. What we seem to be seeing in this new perspective, as I'd say to my daughters, where are the figures and how do you compare the figures? But you are anticipating a deficit of, say, maybe $100 billion, or maybe it's only going to be $98 billion. Oh, well, great. But how can you address these two fundamental issues in this context? Well, I think that's the objective of a budget. The prime responsibility of members of parliament and senators is to determine the volume of money that is made available for Canada. And there's only one pot of money, after all. And how that money should be spent is up to the House of Commons and the Senate. How to invest it, how to increase the power of the economy, the health of the economy. And also, there are principles Canadian principles that have to be respected. You have to take into account the environment, social matters, things like that. But to my mind, that is the reason why I have already indicated some impatience with respect to this budget. There are decisions that have been taken by the government already with respect to expenditures, but there's no budget, there's no clarity, no structure. Now, concerning Quebec and concerning the example brought up by the other member here in Toronto, I quite agree. It's clear there is benefit to identifying the projects that will be there long term. And I think it would be very simple for the government to say, okay, there's the example of the UK where they use this particular scheme, this system that represents Quebec, the views of Toronto, and that's the one we're going to use. End of story. But I respect the benefits of consultation, of course, and hearing a variety of opinions. But when we are acting very, very quickly, it would be perhaps more simple to say, okay, in Toronto, there is one way of managing a budget and communicating with people, as well as in Quebec, and we'll use that. Let's just make it clear, simple, and there is, of course, benefit to some small changes because there are idiosyncrasies that exist with the federal government. But why couldn't you start with something simple, something that would show clear benefit, clearly? Well, my last question, thank you, Mr. Chair. You have just talked about the report you're going to bring in on Thursday. Next, we're looking forward to it. I want to have your counsel, because it'll be my first time analyzing. What should I analyze in this report? What should I understand from this report? How can I compare? Well, I think there's a table on the second page of each report, each financial report with respect to the growth of the economy and also the deficit over the coming 5 years. Begin with that. Begin with that discussion. And then I think I'd move to the last page or the next to last page where there are details dealing with the economy. There are details with respect to households, businesses, and all the various sectors of the economy in terms of forecasting. But you know the details are very important. For many people, forecasting a growth rate, say, of 1%, it's not very high, but it's theoretical. But when you get into the details about what has happened in business, what's happening with the entrepreneurs, with households, with the debt level, I believe that is important. And that will give you, these details will give you a far better sense of what is happening in Canada's communities. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the second supplementary, Chairman. I really appreciate it.
Please, 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to circle back to some of the questions that my colleague was asking around the projections set out in your report regarding housing stock And you've indicated that they certainly don't need to to build 500,000 new homes in order to close the gap. And your numbers are quite a bit lower, 227,000 that could be built. Do you think they're going to be able to achieve that, given what's happening across the country with housing starts?
I think the short answer to the question is we don't know. So as soon as the announcement was made, the most recent announcement on housing was made on Sunday. Yesterday morning, when the office opened up at 7:45, we drafted an information request to the government to ask them for details, exactly how they're planning on spending that $13 billion to transform the housing market. And as soon as we have details regarding how they're planning on doing it, then we will be in a much better position to assess what it looks like. And as soon as we do, as soon as we hear something back, I'll endeavor to get back to you to give you an update on that.
We would appreciate that. Your office references units as its model for housing, but I have some questions about what units means. Do the units also count for varying space, variety, and the needs for families?
In terms of, I would have to get back to you on that in terms of the definition of units. I think I know the answer to that, but it'd be better for everybody if I got back to you with a precise definition on that one. Yeah.
I guess my concern is that there is a way for the government to ensure that families will be able to afford homes that actually meet the need and size for a family. We see a lot of multi-family dwellings perhaps being built as opposed, I guess, rather than a one-size-fits-all approach to housing units. We're looking to see whether or not the needs of families will be taken into consideration.
That's something that we pointed out in previous reports in the past, that the housing that's being created isn't necessarily affordable housing as defined by CMHC, so based upon the government's own definition, and that's something that's definitely a concern. I would note that based upon Sunday's announcement, don't believe everything you read in press releases, but based upon Sunday's announcement, there seemed to be a focus on affordable housing and social housing. But again, I'm not a press release guy, I'm a numbers guy, and until we receive the numbers from the government and details regarding how they're planning on spending the money and how they're planning on organizing themselves, we're not in a good position. I'm not in a good position to comment on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
All done? Great. I know I mentioned we were going to finish up here, but Mr. Patzer has expressed interest. Does anyone on this side wish to intervene? Otherwise, we'll skip right to Mr. Patzer. Perfect. Go ahead, Mr. Patzer, and I think you're sharing your time with Mr. Gill for a question.
Yep,
Go ahead.
you betcha. Thank you very much. Just kind of building off of that then, do you have any projections for the next 5 years for housing? Is housing going to decline? Like what are we looking at here?
We will also have a housing forecast as part of our economic and fiscal outlook that's tabled next Thursday. I would say, without giving you precise numbers, we do have a slowdown in the housing market. So the housing market over the next 24 months or so, we do have a slowing on a national basis that we think is going to happen. And for the precise details, stay tuned until next Thursday at 9 a.m.
Will those details include like what factors are leading to the decline?
It doesn't focus exclusively on housing, but what you see in housing, it's the traditional factors that one would expect at this point, right? So you end up having, obviously, there's a supply side story of the number of homes that you can actually get at this point. And there are obviously constraints on that side that the government seems to recognize and seems to be moving on. And on the demand side, you have the traditional factors of interest rates, so how easy is it to get a mortgage and how much do those mortgages cost? And then the labor market. So do you have a job? So when you go into the bank, do you actually have a T4 slip or a letter from your employer that says this person has this amount of money? It will incorporate those things, and we'll certainly be able to speak to them.
Just have one last question here quickly for you before I pass it on to my colleague. Just briefly, did the government ever contact or consult with the PBO before moving forward with their emissions cap, or basically a production cap? But did they contact your office before implementing it?
Similar to other reports, we were in contact with with technical experts in various government departments with respect to the modeling that they do. In terms of contacting us in advance of going forward or consulting with us, I'd have to check. It would be exceptional were that the case. The government typically don't consult with us, right? We're not, they usually know what our opinion's going to be, and they're usually not interested, but I'll check on that and get back to you. But again, there's the government, and then there are the nonpartisan technical experts in the public service. And again, it's all the same geeky people that have studied the same things and then engage in the same type of modeling, or use the same calculators. So we're always talking with, there's only 36 of us, there are 360,000 of them. So we're always consulting with them to make sure that, this is how we're planning on doing it. Should we round in one direction or another? So there's that type of technical consultation.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll pass my time
Thanks,
to Mr. Gill.
Patzer and Mr. Jakes. Don't feel bad. They don't consult with me either on these. Mr. Gill, go ahead, please. Welcome to OGGO.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here, Mr. Jakes. You touched on quite a few points of that were sort of interest to me. Uncertainty, stability, continuity, the fact that we're not going to be going back to what we had with the U.S. Before the second term of Mr. Trump. The issue I have, we have very high unemployment rate, close to 11%. So you're right, it sucks over there. And very high youth unemployment as well. Where do we go from here if the U.S. is not available to us? And secondly, are we truly a transparent nation when it comes to sharing our fiscal issues in terms of, are we responsible, are we accountable, and are we truly transparent that gives folks out there confidence to come here and invest? Or is that one of the reasons why a lot of capital is leaving our country and going south of the border? Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the questions. In terms of the policy question on where do we go, again, I'm the interim parliamentary budget officer, not the interim parliamentary policy officer. That said, again, going back to the seminal work by the Prime Minister when he was the Associate Deputy Minister of Finance in 2005. One of the key aspects that he highlighted in that microeconomic framework was the idea that you needed to build other trading relationships. So whether it's purely open trade, you need to find other markets where people want to buy our goods or benefit from buying our goods and services. And I think you see that happening right now. The government's been very, even beyond the current government, you roll back the clock over the past 20 years, there's been a really strong emphasis on building and signing and negotiating those other trade relationships. In terms of fiscal issues and transparency, I'll say this on the record. I think Canada has high-class problems when it comes to fiscal transparency. Not to say that you can do away with the Parliamentary Budget Office, because that's one of the reasons why we have high-class problems as opposed to more severe problems. But I would say when you look at other jurisdictions, we're actually a lot further ahead. And it's relative, right? Like, things are tight. There's definitely room for improvement. And we're not France, right? I don't know if anybody else has been following what's been happening with French 10-year bonds over the past 2 weeks. That's not here. And going back to a point I made earlier with respect to the ratings agencies and the quantitative versus qualitative elements, there's still a fair amount of qualitative confidence in the way that we manage. It's not to say things are good, and it's not to say things are going to automatically get better. And at the same time, I don't know, like over the past, since I've been working, like Canada has demonstrated a remarkable ability to reinvent itself during recessions. And Canadians and entrepreneurs have demonstrated their willingness to pick themselves up off the floor and deal with shocks and retool, re-engineer their businesses, hire more, cut back, hire more people, and reorient themselves. So I don't know. On my end, I'm confident, regardless of the rupture. And again, going back to the basic framework of the Canadian economy, right? It's people, right? That's one, and then it's how they're organized. And we have the same people, right? So we have the exact same talented, intrepid individuals. And it's a question of, okay, well, we are organized in one way to sell primarily and be integrated with the U.S., and now we need to organize ourselves in another way. So, and the question in Budget 2025 is, how is that reorganization going to be supported?
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm going to enact Chair's prerogative and ask a few questions myself, if you don't mind. Just a couple of quick questions, Mr. Jakes. First of all, thank you very much for your answers here today. Is the PBO under the 15% cut directive, for lack of better words?
Thank you for the question. No, we are not. So we were exempted from the government's comprehensive expenditure review. I would say that shortly after being appointed at one of the first all-staff meetings that we held, shortly after we had a discussion with the 100,000 job losses across the economy over the course of the summer, there was a feeling that we actually should be doing more. And that's why we've decided to voluntarily offer up a 5% cut to our budget starting in 2026, 2027, so the year ahead, and on an ongoing basis. So that's going to be immediate. As part of that, there's also going to be a fairly significant down payment from the people who can afford it most, and that's the executives at the top. The position of the Parliamentary Budget Officer, interim or otherwise, will have a $50,000 reduction in its salary, starting immediately. So,
for yourself, by yourself, or your executive, or this is all on you?
That's all me.
Oh, remarkable.
So, the context, in comparison to where we were even 6 months ago or 8 months ago, the context has changed. And I take the Prime Minister at his words that it's going to require sacrifices from all of us. I'd say, certainly on my end, I'm in an incredibly privileged situation where I can take a $50,000 pay cut, and hopefully it offsets some of the operating deficit. The 100,000 people that were laid off over the course of the summer, they have less say, and potentially, for a lot of them, they don't have $50,000 that they can kick into the Consolidated Revenue Fund, the government's coffers, to offset the deficit.
Thank you for that. You mentioned you met with finance regarding the budget. Who did you meet with, and what was the general? You mentioned it was a short meeting, I think. What was the general gist of the meeting?
So the focus of the meeting, we met with the Department of Finance. And the focus of the meeting was around the capital, like their ideas around the capital and operating budget definitions. So consistent with, some people may recall that in the Liberal Party of Canada platform, they indicated that they would be consulting with the Parliamentary Budget Office and that our organization would play a role in evaluating or assessing the new definitions. So that was part of the consultation. It was squarely focused on that.
Be like a separate appendix that we do for other matters within the budget, explaining better the capital operating breakout?
I don't know. It wasn't a presentation. It was still relatively early days, so they had indicated they were in the midst of consulting with others. I don't know ultimately where they're going to end up. We provided feedback to them consistent with the observations I made today around potentially, I actually the observation I made was that it might be easier just to use the approach of the UK. They could also take Toronto or Quebec. And that when you're redefining terms that parliamentarians haven't seen, then potentially it creates additional uncertainty because people haven't seen those terms previously. And the importance of having a fiscal anchor. So based upon what's currently being considered, regardless of how you split the funding allocations and what buckets you put them into, the most important aspect is, are the nation's finances sustainable? So those are the points that we highlighted to them, the considerations.
And just two quick last ones, questions, and I'll let you return to your day. You met with the rating agencies, or you mentioned that you meet with them often. Have they expressed concerns at all about the change in the budget or transparency issues around that, or perhaps a lack of a fiscal anchor?
I wouldn't say concerns. Questions. Everyone has questions. Again, it's an odd context for everybody right now, right? So, and even more so in the case, in some situations, more so in the case of Canada because of the timing around the election. So, but they had questions. I definitely wouldn't characterize it as concerns. But you know, everyone knows who the ratings agencies are, so you can definitely invite them in and ask, like, read their material and ask them questions about how they feel about it.
We've seen a back and forth about the 15% and about, I guess, reorganizations among FTEs and the public service. And I think the Prime Minister just went back to being attrition, that they will find cuts. I guess, is there a concern about that where if it's based on attrition, perhaps we could end up with, you know, we're looking to try and grow RCMP, but we put a cap on hiring and there's a disproportionate amount of retirees from that department or from CBSA or from defense procurement. Is there a concern that we're going to be basing on attrition with a cap that could actually hurt services, that could hurt the ability of the government to operate?
The more complex you make, the more complex or the more constraints you put around changing government operations, the harder it is to implement and the greater likelihood that there are unexpected outcomes. So in the case of attrition, based upon what you described, that's certainly a possibility. I would say, like, more broadly, because there have also been statements about looking at lower priority areas or less efficient areas. So potentially attrition is part of that. I don't know. But that approach is typically, when you look at other jurisdictions, that's what they encourage you to focus on. And I know everybody's read the Prime Minister's mandate letter with the 7 priorities, but he's been very clear that he expects the entire public service to be focusing on those priorities. And if you're not part of those priorities, you better figure out how you're going to be contributing to those priorities. Typically, that's a better way of going about things. It's an easier way of going about things, especially if you want to implement a lot of change across government in a very short period of time.
Well, thank you for your time with us. We will excuse you, although I think the members will probably want to chat with you afterwards. We're going to just be 2 quick minutes, everyone. Thursday, we're having a subcommittee meeting, and then we're going to plan out our future meetings from that. We don't have anything set, obviously, for next Tuesday and Thursday next week. Subcommittee will decide a way forward, but we won't be able to get witnesses or study plan that fast. So I'm seeking everyone's permission to leave it with myself and the clerk to fill in next week. I'm thinking of the Auditor General. She's emailed all of us with information about 3 of her most recent study reports that overlap with OGGO, so I'm thinking of bringing her in. Also for a briefing from the Public Service Integrity Commissioner, who ostensibly reports to OGGO. We were trying to get her before, but she's been away. Perhaps the Procurement Ombudsman for an update, just others that are related to OGGO. So if everyone's fine with that, we'll go ahead for next Tuesday, Thursday. And I'm seeing no disagreement. We will. The other issues, the clerk has mailed out to everyone. These are the 2 kind of our standing orders that were left over from the last meeting. One is around when we do bring in a minister, that we bring in their chief financial officer as kind of a go-to. The other is when we ask for documents from the departments. It has been the standard in the committee in the past that we require them to return the items to us within 21 days. So we're just looking for agreement to continue that. It has gone out to everyone's P9 a couple weeks ago, I think.
A few days ago.
A few days ago. So if we're fine with that, we will consider that done. Wonderful. If there is nothing else, we will be adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Jakes. Thank you again. Thanks, everyone. Perfect.